Welcome to Troubleshooting the Console, the second lesson of SEP 14, Maintain and Troubleshoot. In this video, I'll walk you through the components that make up the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. Then we'll spend some time describing SEPM services and their roles. After learning the SEPM architecture, we'll troubleshoot problems related to logging into the console. And if you need to take a closer look behind the scenes, we'll review the database configuration and different connection methods. At the end, we'll cover how to resolve SEPM administrator password and permission-related issues. Let's get started. The Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager is a management server that manages events, policies, and client registration for the client computers that connect to your company's network. The SEPM includes the following components: the management server software, which provides secure communication to and from client computers and the console. The console software coordinates and manages security policies, client computers, reports, logs, administrative functions, and security. You can also install a remote console and use it to log on to the management server from any computer with a network connection. The SEPM installation wizard gives the option of installing an embedded Sybase database to store security policies and events. Alternatively, you can also choose to use an MS SQL database. Symantec recommends SQL Server for organizations that have 1,000 or more computers. The console is the interface to the management server. You can use the console to create or edit security policies for locations and groups. The Policies page in the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager provides a centrally managed solution that handles security policy enforcement, host integrity checking, and automated remediation for clients. Security policies help managed endpoints that connect to the server to get the latest policies, security settings, and software updates. The console also provides the ability to check the status of your environment and manage client computers. On the Clients page, you can review which clients have the latest policies and virus definitions. You can also ensure that protection technologies are enabled and client computers are running the latest version of Semantic Endpoint Protection. After you know the status of your endpoints, you can resolve security issues by running commands from the console. Logs and reports are also available from the console. Logs and reports allow you to conduct a health check of the environment. You can see security events and review compliance on your network. In this example, the SEPM displays an inventory report. From this view, you can see the client version, content information, and available disk space on the system. You can even see if the SEP client is communicating with an ATP server for insight scans. Later in this course, we'll talk more about some of the types of logs and reports that you can use for troubleshooting issues in the environment. You can also perform administrative functions, including managing your management servers and sites. You can back up the SEPM database, grant access to administrators, and perform replication. The following diagram provides a high-level overview of the SEPM architecture. Tomcat manages connections on the management server or for administrators using the remote Java console. Reporting and content management is handled by Apache. Apache also handles communication requests from the client and the web console. In addition to managing reporting and the console, Tomcat also provides access to the help topics and the Java Web Console install package. It plays a significant role in the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. From a logs and reports perspective, the console submits a request to the SEPM and receives a response in HTML format. PHP creates the web page on the management server. The console request mechanism uses a URL to retrieve reports or log data. It's important to note that both the Java console and the web console use the same report and monitoring displays. Now that you've seen the SEPM architecture and its components, let's take a look at the SEPM services. Being able to manage the critical services and processes that run on the SEPM ensures that your SEP 14 installation is running smoothly and allows you to troubleshoot your environment more efficiently. In SEP 14, the Windows Service Control Manager starts 5 Semantic Endpoint Protection services. If you're using the Semantic Embedded Database, you'll see an entry for it in the Windows Services. Here's a SEPM with a Semantic Embedded Database installation. The service stores the configuration settings and security data. If the SEPM installation does not use an embedded database, you can use MS SQL Server. Semantic Launcher manages any SEP services that require elevated access. For example, Live Update. When you install the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager, it installs Apache Web Server. The Apache Web Server runs as an automatic service. It runs under the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager Web Server service. Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager is the primary SEP service that handles communication. Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager API Server manages the integration with other semantic products and third-party applications to automate SEPM functionality and extend SEP capabilities. An example is Advanced Threat Protection. You can use it to automate semantic endpoint protection functions with REST APIs. You can quickly identify services and processes that are not running or using too much CPU or memory resources with the Windows Task Manager or other monitoring tools. You may also see the Live Update service running, but it's only started when a live update is scheduled. Live Update is covered in more detail later in the course. Now let's talk about the processes managed by the SEPM services. Many interactions that you'll see is by semservice.exe. It's the primary process for the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager service, and it controls Apache Tomcat server. Apache Tomcat manages communication between the SEPM and its console. If you're troubleshooting an issue with this process, reference the SEM server and Catalina logs in the Tomcat directory. Apache Web Server provides communication between Apache Tomcat and SEP clients. By default, the Apache Web Server generates only error logs, but if you're troubleshooting a client communication issue, access logging can also be enabled. This diagram provides a high-level overview of the Apache Web Service from a SEPM architecture perspective. During client heartbeat, if running on Windows, the endpoint can be configured to receive content updates. The client also sends event and op state information and receives policy changes. The Apache Web Service manages both incoming and outgoing traffic for the management server. Traffic goes into the inbox and outbox on the management server. The endpoint retrieves updates from the outbox and posts updates into the inbox. From there, Tomcat processes updates to the SEPM database. Let's take a closer look at the Apache Web Service and processes. After the SEPM service starts, the following services stay resident in memory. Two occurrences of httpd.exe and rotate-logs.exe run. The first occurrence are the resident processes, and the second occurrence are the working processes. You can distinguish the difference by the amount of memory the processes are using. A working process uses more memory than a resident process. Java processes also run on the SEPM. You may see multiple java.exe processes running because one runs for each SEPM console. So if you have an administrator logged in local and remotely, you'll see multiple instances. javaw.exe runs for the local Java-enabled console only. Logging off and selecting exit closes the Java session immediately on the SEPM, which is a semantic best practice. In this topic, you'll learn how to troubleshoot problems that prevent you from logging onto the SEPM console. There are multiple causes for issues when logging into the SEPM console. The management server may fail to connect to the database, which requires a review of the database configuration. If the home, monitors, and report pages are blank, then you may need to review the PHP settings and database configuration. For invalid certificate issues, you can add and accept the certificate on the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. You'll also experience problems logging into the console if the services are not running. Or if it's an incorrect username and password, you can reset the password or configure the user account to use an Active Directory account. You can learn more from the KB listed on the screen. So let's apply the troubleshooting methodology from Lesson 1 to resolving console logon issues. When gathering evidence, it's important to identify the symptoms. You may experience several symptoms. For example, errors on the console, poor SEPM performance, or SEPM services may not remain running or even start. Then identify whether it's specific to a particular management server or if it also occurs on another management server connected to the same database. For more information on troubleshooting console issues, see the KB listed on the screen. You also collect Tomcat and Windows Event Viewer logs during the gather evidence phase. The console records activity to the scm_ue.log and the scm_error.log in the temp directory. If the console experiences issues connecting to the database, you may also see entries in the database connection and SCM server logs. If services fail to remain in a start state, you can also find entries in the Windows Event Viewer. Another approach to gathering evidence would be to download SimDiag to detect console login issues. For more information on this topic, see the KB listed on the screen. Common issues with the SEP Apache web server are often related to performance or communication. To troubleshoot communication problems between the SEP and SEP client, review the access logs. If you see network bandwidth becoming overloaded when clients are downloading content or client packages, you can also enable bandwidth throttling. Bandwidth throttling, by default, is disabled, but you can turn it on for troubleshooting purposes. For more information on the Apache web server logs and when a SEPM fails to load, see the URLs shown on the screen. To analyze Tomcat logs, browse to the SEPM install directory, click on Tomcat logs, and open the scm-0.log file with Notepad. Search for keywords like error or failed, and check the timestamp to help find the problem. In this example, you can see the connection failed to MSSQL. To shed more light on the issue, I can review the database connection log to see what's happening behind the scenes. Other useful SEPM logs are the catalina.error, ajaxswing.log, and catalina.out. It is also a best practice to look at the end of the logs, because the logs are in chronological order. Handle log analysis with care, as is an essential task in the troubleshooting process. If you overlook a few lines, then you may not be able to find the cause of the issue. It's possible the issue could be Tomcat related, so make sure to check your other infrastructure resources. The screen shows some other best practices that need to be kept in consideration while performing a log analysis. If the issue is not reproducible, you may have to leave logging on until it reoccurs. Monitor this carefully, as logging can quickly consume disk space. After gathering sufficient information, turn off logging and copy the relevant logs for further analysis. The output provides a snapshot of the issue in action and expedites troubleshooting. For more information on this topic, see the KB listed on the screen. If you're troubleshooting a reporting issue, enable PHP logging to record any warning or error messages. To turn on PHP error logging, locate the php.ini file under the PHP directory. Open the file with Notepad and set log errors to on. It will save it to the reporting.log under the SEPM Apache logs directory. There is a file size limit for the reporting.log, which is 10 megabytes. If the file size is bigger than 10 megabytes, it's overwritten. Note that the PHP engine itself creates most of the reporting log entries, which minimizes its use for troubleshooting. But if semantic support directs you to enable PHP logging, or you'd like to look at it in its correspondence with the Tomcat logs, it's a helpful tool. When you connect to the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager, you may be warned by your web browser that there is a problem with the security certificate. The warning may appear as soon as you access the Remote Console web page. Another symptom may be connecting to the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager web console using Internet Explorer. The tab panel sidebar does not display. To secure communication between the SEPM and clients, digital certificates for authentication are enabled by default. These can be self-signed, created at the time of the SEPM installation, or signed by a third party and installed post-installation. For more information, see the KBs listed on the screen. When researching symptoms for a SEPM console logon issue, establish a plan of action. I've listed some examples using the scenarios from earlier. When researching symptoms for 100% CPU or high memory utilization, turn on Tomcat Debug and check for low disk space. Also review connectivity to the database and verify that ports are open. When troubleshooting Apache issues, enable debugging. If the management server hosts other Tomcat-based applications, check to see if Tomcat works for the other applications. Also verify that ports are open. When troubleshooting database problems, ensure SQL or embedded database services are running. Check connectivity between the database and the server. If the SEPM is on SQL, run the SQL Configuration Manager. For logon issues, identify whether the user is using Symantec or Active Directory authentication. Check to see if other users can log onto the SEPM. If it's specific to a particular user account, reset the password or verify that the user is entering the correct password. After establishing a plan of action, it's time to repair and validate. During the repair phase is when you apply a corrective action. Updating the database configuration ensures that you can connect to the database. Ensuring the SEPM and database services are running also establishes a connection to the database. Or if you're experiencing a login issue specific to a user, reset the password or configure the user account to use Active Directory. For certificate-related issues, update or restore the certificate on the SEPM. The following describes situations where the certificate needs to be updated or restored. The first scenario describes an issue related to the reinstall of the SEPM without a recovery file. It can sometimes happen if the SEPM was migrated to a new server or you just performed disaster recovery. Or perhaps you replaced one SEPM with another SEPM and want to use the same IP and server name. If you have multiple server certificates, this situation can also happen if the wrong server certificate was applied after disaster recovery. Another example would be purchasing a certificate from a provider like DigiCert, and you want to use that certificate instead of the default server certificate. For more information on certificate issues, see the URLs shown on the screen. In this topic, we'll take a look at database configuration and connection methods for the Symantec Endpoint Protection Manager. But before describing database issues, it's important to review the SEPM database options. Several factors can influence the type and size of the database that you choose. It also changes the storage requirements on the SEPM. Factors can include maintenance, backup configuration, the number of content revisions to keep, log retention settings, content updates, and application learning. A good DBA is a necessity, especially when performing advanced maintenance on a Microsoft SQL server. Take a look at the SEP database options. Symantec supports two database engines. When chosen, an embedded database runs on Sybase ASA that is installed by default on the SEPM. Symantec recommends this database for smaller installations with less than 1,000 clients and with a maximum of 5,000 clients. The installation sets the password for both the SEPM administrator and SEM5 DBA. However, in SEP 14 installations, if you update the SEPM admin password, the database password stays the same. Recording this password is important. In SEP 14, you can rerun the management server configuration wizard and change an embedded database password. The SQL database can be SQL Server 2016, 2014, RTM SP2, 2012, RPM SP3, 2008 R2 SP3, and SP4. You can install SQL on the SEPM or a separate machine. Symantec recommends this database for larger installations and requires SQL for installations for over 5,000 clients. The architecture diagram shows how the management server updates processes in the database. When endpoints heartbeat with the manager, Apache delivers new events and op state data to the inbox. The SEPM also checks with Symantec Security Response for updates. Tomcat handles these operations using three functions. VirusCat, which stands for virus category, processes updates from Security Response and updates the SEPM homepage with threat landscape information. The Agent Log Collector processes event data from the client inbox log folders to the database. The Agent Info Collector processes op state data. Here are some examples of database issues. One symptom is that you're experiencing Tomcat-related errors. To resolve, analyze the Tomcat logs and search for connection-related errors. Based on your findings, you may need to check the database configuration or rerun the management server configuration wizard. For low disk space, free up disk space on the file system and move the database backups to a new location. For database performance issues, review the database configuration. You can also run SQL Server tracing and analyze logs. For transaction log corruption, resolve by recreating the transaction log and running backups more regularly. For more information on this topic, see the KB listed on the screen. You can also see some common issues with an embedded database. During a default installation, you set the password for both the SEP administrator and the SEM5 DBA. However, if the admin changes the password, the database password stays the same, so it's important to record the password. You can replace the database password by running the Management Server Configuration Wizard. Database problems can cause problems logging onto the SEPM. Check that the embedded database is running correctly. Verify that the services are running and that the ports are correct. Data fragmentation or space issues can also cause the database to be unresponsive. For more information on each of these topics, see the KB articles shown on the screen. Let's apply the troubleshooting methodology for resolving database issues. During the Gather Evidence phase, you collect Tomcat and Windows Event Viewer logs. If the SEPM is experiencing database connectivity issues, you may also see entries in the database connection-0.log and the SCM server-0.log. If services fail to remain in a start state, you can also find entries in the Windows Event Viewer. Another approach to gathering evidence would be to download SimDiag to detect database connectivity issues. For more information on this topic, see the KB listed on the screen. For embedded database installations, you can reference the out.log. The out.log provides a timeline of what occurs during the embedded database startup. Now that we've gathered evidence and established the symptoms, it's time to research. When researching SQL database problems, ensure SQL services are running and the SEPM can communicate with the SQL server. You can test connectivity by logging into SQL Management Studio on the SEPM or testing connectivity via ODBC. In the SQL Server Configuration Manager, check the TCP port configuration. Ensure that TCP/IP protocol is enabled. To analyze a logon problem, search for keywords like error or connection in the SCM server, database connection, and Catalina.out logs. For more information, use the KB shown on the screen. If the SEPM cannot connect to the database, investigate if the SQL services are operating correctly by performing the following steps. Open the Service Control Manager from Start Run and type in services.msc. Look for the SQL Server service. In this example, SQL Server is running, yet the SEPM cannot connect. In Step 2, look at the network and see if SQL is listing on the network. You can do this by opening a command window and typing in netstat-anp TCP. SQL should be listing on TCP port 1433. Then open up the SQL Configuration Manager from the Start menu. Expand SQL Server Network Configuration and click Protocols for MS SQL Server. Check the status for TCP/IP. It should be enabled. If it's disabled, right-click TCP/IP and select Enable. Then click OK to the message prompting you to restart the SQL Server services. When troubleshooting MS SQL problems, verify the following: that you've specified a name instance during the installation and configuration, then also making sure that SQL Server is running underneath Windows services. You can also see the SQL Server service running on TCP port 1433. To verify communication in the remote database, run an ODBC test to ensure connectivity. And to gather more information, examine the SCM server log under Tomcat logs in the SEPM install directory for possible indications of the cause. For more information, see the KB articles shown on the screen. If you're having embedded database problems, it's a good practice to test the ODBC connection. First, verify that the semantic embedded database service is running, and that dbserv16.exe is listening on TCP port 2638. Then follow these steps to test the ODBC connection with the embedded database. The first step is to click Start and type in odbccad32.exe from the system root syswow64 folder. In the ODBC Data Source Administrator dialog box, select System DSN. On the System DSN tab, open Semantic Endpoint Security DSN. On the ODBC tab, verify that the data source name drop-down list is Semantic Endpoint Security DSN and type an optional description. Click Login. On the Login tab, in the User ID text box, type DBA. In the Password text box, type the password for the database. This is the password that you've entered for the database when you installed the SEP. Select Database. On the Database tab in the Server Name text box, type \\, server name / instance name. If you're using the English version of Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager, type default SIM5. Otherwise, leave the server name text box blank. On the ODBC tab, select Test Connection and verify that it succeeds. If the above steps do not resolve the issue, examine the Tomcat Logs folder and look at the SCM server log for possible indications of the cause. If the issue persists, perform a repair of the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager from Control Panel. For more information on troubleshooting database and communication issues, see the KB article shown on the screen. If the database struggles to respond to requests, SEP performance is affected. You may find the console unresponsive, data may not refresh as quickly as usual, and database errors may be appearing in the Tomcat logs. Performance issues can cause frustration for the SEP administrator, but more importantly, it can prevent the clients from receiving crucial updates to ensure their continuous protection. To troubleshoot the connection, open the database_connection-0.log and scroll through the log to look for connection errors. For more information, see the KB article shown on the screen. After identifying the source of the issue, it's time to repair and validate. During the repair phase, you apply a corrective action. Corrective actions include ensuring that Enable TCP option is enabled in the SQL Configuration Manager and restarting services to resolve database connectivity issues. An example of a connectivity issue would be a failed to connect to the server message when logging into the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. For low disk space issues, free up disk space on the file system or move database backups to a new location. You can also move the data folder to a different drive and then run the Management Server Configuration Wizard to reconnect. If you're experiencing database performance issues, migrate the embedded database to SQL. With SQL, you can run maintenance jobs like reindexing to speed up performance with the database. Other operations include rebuilding the transaction log and running backups regularly. Poor database performance can have multiple causes. One potential cause on large sites is when the SEP client firewall policies have excessive logging enabled. If you need to identify the source of the issue, run an SQL server trace and analyze the logs. For issues with high disk I/O or low disk space issues, move the embedded database to a different drive. Or if your SQL server is on the same server as the SEPM, moving it to an SQL instance on a dedicated server can help significantly. And for organizations with embedded installations, consider migrating to SQL. Symantec recommends that only an experienced database administrator migrate the database. For more information on each of these topics, see the KB articles shown on the screen. Take a look at the high-level procedures that are required to migrate an embedded database to MSSQL. Note that you uninstall and reinstall the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager as part of this process. It's currently the only way of removing an embedded database and reconfiguring the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager for Microsoft SQL. During the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager reinstallation, Symantec recommends that you let the installer create and reinitialize the database. You may optionally use an SQL database that you created and initialized yourself. The procedure that you follow depends on whether a recovery file exists on the machine that runs the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. By default, you can find the file in the private key backup directory within the SEPM install folder. For more information, see the KB articles shown on the screen. The Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager Database Backup and Restore Wizard saves backups in a non-configurable location below the SEPM Data Backup Directory. Although you cannot directly configure the backup folder location, you can place the SEPM data folder in an alternative location. The SEPM data folder needs to be on a fast and local drive to prevent I/O bandwidth starvation. A copy of the data folder at the time of reconfiguration is left in the default location after the reconfiguration completes. This step is helpful for archival purposes. Organizations updating their SEPM's virus and spyware definitions via a JDB file must ensure they are placing the JDB file into the new data directory and not the archive. For more information on moving an embedded database location, see the KB article shown on the screen. For optimizing database performance, see the following best practices. You can also learn more with the KB listed on the screen. In this final topic, we'll talk about how to resolve administrator password and permission-related issues. To reset a lost password, ensure the following items are enabled. Display the Forgot Your Password link so that administrators can reset lost passwords, and configure the mail server so that the mail server sends the notification. You can enable the feature by checking Allow Administrators to Reset Passwords in the Passwords tab of the SEPM site properties. Note that this method is used for administrator accounts using Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager authentication. This does not apply for RSA, Secure ID, or directory server authentication. But let's do a quick review of the different SEPM administrator account types. The system administrator provides access to all features. When logged on as a system administrator, you can manage all domains and sites. You can also create and manage all other accounts. System administrators manage the databases and management servers for all sites. An administrator is also known as a domain administrator. When using an administrator account, you manage a single domain, including the administrator and limited administrator accounts within the domain. You also manage the password rights for limited administrators and other administrators who have equal or less restrictive access rights. If authorized, an administrator fully manages a site through site rights. However, administrators cannot modify their own site rights. For limited administrators, rights must be explicitly granted. You provide limited administrators full access, no access, or read-only access to site functionality, such as reporting or managing specific client groups. To set up a SEPM administrator account to use Active Directory authentication, add an Active Directory server to the SEPM. After adding an Active Directory server, you create or change an administrator account to use directory authentication. To complete the process, test the account by having the user log on to the SEPM using the linked Active Directory password. If your organization has a replicating Active Directory installation, add the replicating domain controllers. By adding multiple domain controllers, it ensures that you can log onto the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. When setting up Active Directory integration, do not modify the built-in SEPM admin account. Doing so can prevent access to the SEPM. Lockout issues can occur when changing the Active Directory account, upgrading Active Directory, changing Active Directory mode, or when removing a SEPM as a replication partner. In this lesson, you learned how to recognize main SEPM processes, components, and ports. You also learned how to troubleshoot embedded and MS SQL database configurations. In addition, you learned what can prevent logging onto the SEPM console. Finally, you reviewed how to reset the SEPM administrator password and check administrator permissions. For more information about the topics discussed in this lesson, refer to the resources listed on this and the following slides, and remember to frequently check the Semantic Support website. Thank you for watching this lesson video.